And now, the MacArthur Five.
Hello, Skipper. Well, hello, Skipper. It's so nice to see you back where you belong. You're looking swell, Skipper, but oh hell, Skipper, you must sweat a lot with all the clouds you're counting on. We know you got Ewing keeping Russ stewing, so we'll have the biggest march you've ever seen. But you're the guy, Skipper, who makes the whole thing fly, Skipper. Now that you're back, we know it's in the bag, just as Van Campen. Now that you're back, we know it's in the bag.
The first thing John MacArthur taught me was that you should never, ever refer to a life insurance premium as a layaway plan. The second thing he taught me was that you are never old until your dreams turn gray. And the third thing this man has taught me is that we get up when we fall down. Biographies are a favorite of mine, and in my study of those whose lives have been such that the world comes to call those men, those women successful, it seems to me there is this one common denominator. They get up when they fall down. Twice over this unsinkable John MacArthur, the doctors have counted to 9, you know. Each time he got back to his feet and he said, now wait a minute, hold everything, and he's outlived all those doctors. And here he is surprising a lot of us this year by being here, instead of just from a distance pointing the way. Showing the way to get up when you fall down. Inspiring as he has always been to all of us. Motivating each of us to be something more than we are.
As we all know, no one man ever did anything. It's always a combined efforts of many, and I've had a lot of help and a lot of good luck. And not only good luck in the sense that things happened the way they didn't expect they'd happen, but in addition, it was good luck that I met the people that made this company possible.
Probably the most important person in John MacArthur's life was his second wife, Catherine. Catherine and John MacArthur had many disagreements, but she would stick with him throughout his ambitious career. They met while Catherine was working as a secretary for John's brother, Alfred.
It was my oldest brother, Alfred, who had gone into the insurance business, and he had really prospered. And so he invited me to join him. And I had the privilege of being his office boy, and I observed him closely, and then I went writing insurance and was very successful for a young fella.
It was in 1928 that Alfred was promoted to vice president of Central Life. John's other brother, Telfer, had formed a successful newspaper company, and his third brother, Charlie, who was married to actress Helen Hayes, was about to become a successful playwright after his first play, The Front Page, opened on Broadway to rave reviews. John, now 31 and unemployed, knew he had to do something.
The only thing I knew was life insurance, and I went back to work for my brother, and Charlie'd outgrown his brother, and I kind of felt maybe I'd outgrown mine. So after I guess it was 1928, I got the big head and decided that I would start an insurance company of my own. It was great. I had quite a acquaintance in the business.
That acquaintance would be his good friend Leo Lehane, who he met while working for his brother Alfred. Leo had brought the news John had been waiting for, that an insurance company was for sale, and in April 1928, for only $7,500, John MacArthur bought Marquette Life Insurance. With 9 agents, 10 including himself, and Catherine responsible for all other aspects of the company, John intended to construct an industry giant.
And I remember 10 of us sat around the table and added up our own personal production. I'd been very successful in that I had written $1 million worth of life insurance in a single year, which back in those days was a great achievement. I conceived of the idea that I found from experiences, putting it better, that if I could do business with a man for what he had in his pocket, I could do business. So I got out a policy that sold for $1 a month. And most anybody give you $1 to have some insurance. Our simple policy, which all premiums were uniform, and the dollar bought the amount of insurance that were entitled to at your age. And so that it was very simple. Now, there was only one kind of insurance then, and that we dealt in, and that was if you lived, you paid. If you died, we paid you.
From this simple policy or formula for success, John MacArthur created an empire that included Bankers Life and Casualty, radio and television stations, ranches, and cities, and in the early 50s, he had foreclosed on several thousand acres in Palm Beach County, Florida, that later would become his garden city we know today as Palm Beach Gardens. I like land, he said, because you can see things grow. It isn't a lot of figures on a statement. When you get all through, the ground you walk on is your basic value. MacArthur's plan was to build a garden city with flowering planters on street corners and winding streets that would all be named after flowers and trees. A giant 80-year-old banyan tree was moved to North Lake Boulevard. It would become the entrance to Palm Beach Gardens. On the morning of April 26, 1961, John D. MacArthur sent 2 large cranes to lift the banyan tree onto 2 cargo trailers for the move to its new home 5 miles away. However, an unforeseen problem arose when a feed truck burst and spewed 10,000 gallons of molasses onto a roadway that was specially bulldozed to move the tree. The fill used to cover the spill raised the roadway just enough to make the tree hit and snap several railroad signal lines, which caused crossing gates to close down for 8 miles. Then the tree dropped when one of the cables being used to hoist it over the train snapped. When the 1:30 p.m. train came down the track, it was forced to stop, and workmen had to get busy and saw off some of the limbs of the tree to clear the tracks. 13 minutes later, though, the train was on its way, and shortly after 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the tree was dropped into the hole, and Reverend A.P. Snyder said a prayer. When questioned about the expense of moving the older tree instead of just planting a new one, MacArthur responded by saying, "I can buy anything but age. This tree is a centerpiece of our entrance, and while we could plant a little one there, I won't be around 80 years from now to see it as it should be." It wasn't until 1963 that John MacArthur made one of his most significant real estate transactions of his life. He bought the 15-year-old Colonnades Beach Hotel located on the southern end of Singer Island in Palm Beach Shores, Florida. Eventually, John and his wife Catherine would move into a modest apartment overlooking the parking lot of the hotel, and John would conduct his business from a back table in the hotel's coffee shop. There was always a telephone on the table, a full coffee cup, a machine that squeezed fresh orange juice, and an ashtray overflowing. From this table, John could keep an eye on things at the hotel as he closed on real estate deals, checked in with the Chicago office, and occasionally even talked with reporters. Mr. MacArthur liked this location because he felt that if he had these people in a formal office, he'd have to be courteous to them. But from the coffee table, he could get up any time he wanted to, walk into the kitchen, or out the back door to feed his ducks and escape. It was here that MacArthur had been pulled into a cops and robbers drama over the DeLong Star ruby that weighed in at over 100 carats. The ruby was the object of an infamous burglary carried out by Jack Murph the Surf Murphy and 2 other men. The gem was being held ransom for a Miami underworld loan. The loan, for $25,000, had to be paid off. Hence the need for MacArthur's money. At the time, John D. MacArthur was one of only 5 living American billionaires, which included H.L. Hunt, Howard Hughes, John Paul Getty, and Daniel K. Ludwig.
And the loan had been made, and the loan hadn't been paid back, and the man was allegedly a temperamental.
Yesterday, Antel stuffed the $25,000 in his pockets and drove off to the phone booth to wait for more instructions. Later that night, Antel called MacArthur and told him to go to another telephone booth in Palm Beach. Call from Antel. Frederici was instructed to search the ceiling of the booth for the ruby. He finally touched something that felt like a pebble. It looked like the DeLong ruby, but MacArthur was determined to make a positive identification. A prominent local jeweler was asked to come to the hotel to inspect and identify.
At the entrance, completion of this, Mr. weighed the ruby.
And there it was determined to be the DeLong Star ruby. His recovery of the gem was front-page news in every major newspaper. Of course, always being frugal, it turned out later that John MacArthur would claim a tax deduction on the money. But he also recognized how much publicity he generated for $25,000. Indeed, it was an advertising PR bargain, not only for Bankers Life and Casualty, but also for Palm Beach Gardens. Realizing the amount of publicity he'd gotten from the media, MacArthur decided media might be a good industry. Thus, MacArthur Productions was formed. MacArthur Productions helped to create television shows like Gentle Ben, which was filmed partly in Palm Beach Gardens, and probably the most controversial show of the production company was the TV game show Treasure Isle.
On the Blue Atlantic from the Colonnades Beach Hotel in Palm Beach Shores, Florida, it's the new outdoor game show, Treasure Isle.
Treasure Isle in Florida, on sunny Palm Beach shores. You hunt for treasure on Treasure Isle, find it, yep, and the treasure is yours.
And just like finding the treasure in the game show, MacArthur struck gold when he discovered a major sports organization was looking to relocate its headquarters. Being the shrewd businessman, MacArthur realized the dynamics of Florida's East Coast. He also knew the impact the Professional Golfers Association of America would have in his efforts to help sell his Palm Beach Gardens development. In March of 1965, the Professional Golfers Association of America moved into the East Wing of the PGA National Golf Club, later to be called JDM Country Club, known today as Ballin Isles. PGA National hosted several professional golf events, including the 1971 World Cup of Golf that featured Jack Nicklaus and Lee Trevino and brought the national television attention that helped expose Mr. MacArthur's Garden City and once again shined the spotlight on Mr. Mac. Over 4 decades later, the PGA headquarters still resides in Palm Beach Gardens, less than a mile away from its original location, and it still attracts the national attention Mr. MacArthur had always envisioned. From its original inception, Palm Beach Gardens has grown like the mighty banyan tree Mr. MacArthur had planted over a half-century ago. With his hands-on approach and common-sense mentality, Mr. MacArthur helped mold the city into what it is today. With over half of the 56 square miles dedicated to green space and a residential population of over 45,000, this signature city encompasses restaurants, shopping, churches, schools, parks, sports and aquatic complexes, and much more. Palm Beach Gardens has grown to attract a generation of friends and families who enjoy year-round activities. Without the vision of Mr. MacArthur and the people he surrounded himself with, all this might not have been attainable.
And it's been a great period to live. I remember distinctly Marconi and his wireless, and I lived to see a boat saved and 19 lives saved and whatnot, and I remember the headlines, and I remember when the Wright brothers took off and they flew for 9 minutes, and I also remember landing on the moon. And a lot of things happened. And I'm very happy to be alive. And I know everybody in this room knows that one man never did anything worthwhile alone. It was a combined efforts of many, and I'm most grateful to everybody in this room except that loafer over there, who, all right, I'll talk to you privately. But it's been great. It's been unbelievable. We're talking about it today. We finally concluded that there is no formula. There is no reason why. It just happened and nobody knows. And if everybody knew, well, it'd be a tougher business. And we're just lucky that whatever the ingredients are, nobody knows, but all we know is it works. And I'm not going to keep you another second. Thanks for everything. Thanks for coming to my family reunion. All this crap that you heard was incidental. Good night.
You know something, Liz, I've been looking forward to this day for a long time, because not only do I get to introduce everyone to a friend of mine, I get to talk about a man who was very important in my life. As a matter of fact, he was my very first boss. And a lot of people knew him because he was one of the most prolific developers, and of course he was one of the richest men in the world, and he was a local resident for many years. He was John D. MacArthur, but to all of us, we just called him Boss, Mr. Mac. And today, we're going to have an interview with the man who has written this new book, John D. MacArthur, A View from the Bar. And he, too, is a very good friend of mine. He is Bob Sanford. Bob, thanks for coming in. This book, I know, had to be a lot of fun to write. I bet you enjoyed it.
I had a real ball with it. Of course, it was frustrating because I had never written a book before. But all in all, you're right. It's been a lot of fun, and I'm glad I finally got to do it.
Well, I just think basically the fact that he was, an 8th grade dropout in school, and he's accomplished that in his life. That's saying something right there, you know, put your mind to something.
That's right.
And he made it happen, you know. So I think that's inspiration.
Other than meeting such a character, I call him a character because he wasn't your run-of-the-mill rich person. To know he's a very common person. You'd never know that he had any money to look at him, or that he came for money, or that he was a successful businessman by looking at him, but you would after you spent any time talking with him.
Another day my son came over, and I introduced him to him, and he invited him over for lunch, for a bowl of soup. And he was 8 years old, and he said, okay, said, I have something to do over here, would you join me? And so, okay, so we went over to the bar, and there were some round glass things that they were hanging up behind the bar. So Mr. MacArthur said, well, if you would, to the son, if you would take these and wipe them off and make sure they're nice and clean, and then hand them to the bartender, then we'll go ahead and do these other things. And my son's been looking at me like, what are we doing? Why are we doing this? You know, because he's actually being put to work. And I didn't really know myself until then Mr. MacArthur said to him when we were done, he said, well, thank you very much, young man, for your assistance. And one thing I want you to remember your whole life, there is no free lunch.